28, 2021. Mr. Jones, please call the roll. Clear.
Okay.
Here.
Sorry. Here.
Here. Here. Here. Here. Quorum is present and Mr. Jones. Please join me in the salute to the flag.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So prior to this public meeting, we had our executive session. In executive session, we talked about personnel issues, hip cases, and the legal status report. Dr. Maris, did you see what report?
Thank you, Dr. Wolkowski. My report tonight is only looking forward to Dr. McGarry's meeting report and also celebrating our girls' Hampton tennis team.
Thank you, Dr. Maris. Mr. Jones, you have a business administrator's report?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really pleased to work with the on their website to start getting really high specifics of leading all staff and what the process is really getting to know the details of the program.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. The New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Scotts Plains Family Board of Education has posted notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted at the Board of Education offices, 512 Cedar Street, Scotts Plains, New Jersey. And such notice was also provided in written notice and forwarded to the Times, now known as the Union County Hall, the Star Ledger, the Township Clerk of Scotts Plains, and the Borough of Fanwood, and the revised annual notice of regularly scheduled meetings as adopted September 1st, 2021. At this time, we will have our instructional update, starting with the recognition of the girls' dance.
So I would like to invite Mr. Pete to come and speak on behalf of the girls' tennis team's successful season. I did attend one of the matches that happened in Fanwood, and you were remarkable to watch. You are so skilled. It was really such an impressive experience for me, and I recognize that I should just go to your matches more frequently, and I will not need to go into Queens to the U.S. Open. So thank you for all that you put into developing your expertise. Mr. Petey?
Thank you, Dr. Mass, the whole school board for your support. This was an incredible year. It's actually funny you say that. We had one person, Dia here, Manuel, who was county champ in her play. And I was watching it with Vinny Keith and Tortorella. We were watching the match, and we were both kind of saying, "You don't have to go to the U.S. Open. We're right here. We can watch this." It was just such incredible tennis that they were playing. There's this great book on high school athletics. It's called "In These Girls Hope Is a Must." This team is a little different. Hope wasn't the thing we had most of the year, because we never could look beyond what we were doing at that moment. Everything was so close. place the word based on these girls, and something they talk a lot about to me, is persistence, and what that word really means. So you understand a little bit how close this was. I'm going to start 49 years ago. That was the last time we won in Scotch Plains the state sectional. We've never won a state championship. So the year before I was born was the last time we were even close to this position. Getting into the season, we knew it was tough because, as in this book, and these girls focus on muscle, they faced the unbeatable foe. And they lost to that foe year after year after year. And for us, that foe was Milburn. And a lot of times we couldn't even get to Milburn, much less have a chance of beating. And I think everyone here will remember we were online last year, and they wanted to go play Milburn last year. And we couldn't because of COVID. So that was something we wanted, but we couldn't think that far ahead. They couldn't think that far ahead. To give you a feel for that, in the sectional semifinal, the match before we were going to beat Milburn, we're playing the match, first and second singles won, both doubles lost. It's coming down to the DDA ball at third singles. It goes to a third set. It gets to be 4-4 in the third set. It's 2 darts to play. You have to come back the next day. Okay, it was just DDD and Edie goes out there and she loses the first game. So it's in the second game, it's deuce. We're literally 2 points away from our season being over. He finds a way to win those points. And this is where that persistence came in and focus. He won the next game, and so she was, I think he was serving her for the match. And the opponent made a bad foul. It was horrible. The coach standing right there was like, yeah, it wasn't. 2 points later, makes another bad call. So in this game, she has 3 points she should have won, and that she didn't. And she just kept playing, and she still won that game. Like, to beat up high school students to have a coach basically standing in front of the machine, and to not let it affect you, and to keep playing through that, that says so much about her, but that's how this team is. Because every match was like that. So we finally get to play Milburn. We're playing at Milburn. And we get there, and they walk out there, and you can see that they're champions. They were trying to be loud, to kind of distract us and show that, hey, we're Milburn, you can't beat Milburn. And they all of their matches won 2 games in a row. But then all of a sudden, the persistence, the focus, and they just focus on one shot at a time. It doesn't matter what's happening out there. They would focus on one shot at a time. That's the thing they taught me. That it's not always about what happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future. In the end, there's a ball in front of you. And the only thing you can control is how you hit that ball. And that's what they did. And that's what got us through. So we're playing against Milburn in that sectional final. And it's coming down to second and third singles again. And actually, Edie had a little easier match. It was Dia who had a harder match. The opponent was up 5-4 in the second set. And he had just kind of played the points. And what wasn't really for either of them, either of those matches, that they played much better than they normally do. It was that they were able to play the way they always do. And their opponent, when it came down to the big moment, they're thinking about winning the match. They're thinking about winning the state sectional final. They were thinking, our team was thinking about hitting the ball. And that's how they won the match. Those matches were both won 3-2. There was no room for error. And it was kind of interesting because we won that sectional final against Milburn. We're all excited, we got the trophy, and we're like, okay, what happens next? Because we didn't even know what happens next, because all we focused on was that match. And it was even talking to Mr. Miller. He was like, okay, where do we go now? I said, I think we're at Mercer County on Thursday, but I wasn't even sure. There was nothing after that match. It was just an over. So we get into the state semifinal and final. They're both played on the same day down in Mercer County Park. Anna is always the first singles, just dominating, giving us that real edge in the beginning. He and Edie in the first round won easy. So we get into the state final against Hennepin. And we've never been there. They have. So what do we do? How do we get through this? And again, it was actually a lot of fun because Anna went out there, won her match. Having Anna at first singles these last 4 years has been the most incredible. Dia and Dee had tough matches in second and third singles. First doubles goes out there and wins the first set rather easily, if I remember right, against a very good team. So we have the first set in 4 matches, but it is close. And for Dia was playing against a player who was kind of pushing. Dia asked me, hey, can you watch so you give me a little input? So I sat and watched because other one was playing well. And within a minute, Dia figured it out. She knew exactly what she needed. So I'm going back and forth between matches. It's really close to second, third singles, and first doubles. Dia wins her match. Anna wins her match. And again, that notion of being in the moment, of not thinking about all the other things that happen. I go up to watch Edie's match, and she actually made a bad call. She didn't do it on purpose, but she made a bad call. The official overruled her. She's down 4-3 in the second set. She just got overruled as a sophomore in high school by an official, which does not happen a lot. And I just said to her, Edie, he made the call, take it off. She goes out there, wins the next 3 games easily. So in that moment where she was challenged, where something could have prevented it, I saw that happen. I'm like, well, there goes our state championship. Because it affects anyone, but it didn't affect her. And the one kind of crazy thing about all of it, when Edie clinched it for us in that state final, we're all go out on the court for her. And she looked like she'd been through war. It wasn't even happiness yet. It took a good 20 minutes for everyone to realize, like, holy cow, we just won the state championship. And that's just because we were always in that moment. What they did this year, it was unbelievable. Maybe beating Milburn was a possibility, but no one was ever thinking about it. So to do that, the first one in history with this team, they are such an incredible group of us. And it starts with Anna for the last 4 years that she has set a tone of how to work, how to stay focused. And it just has transferred to the rest of the team, and it will help make this team good in the future. So,
Thank you, Coach Petey. You can hear that he paid attention to every detail of every game. And if you watch them play, that really pops out in the way that he coaches. So congratulations to Coach Petey and the girls' tennis team. Now Dr. Kolakowski is going to read the resolution, and Mr. Evans is going to hand out the resolution and congratulate the girls. Thank you, Dr.
Whereas the 2021 varsity girls tennis team has the most remarkable season in the history history of the girls' tennis at Scotch Plains Family High School. And whereas the team placed third overall in the county championships at Upstein Field in Plainfield at the end of September. Following an outstanding showing at the county championships, the team earned the third seed in the North 2 Group 3 sectional tournament, hosting Belleville on September 30th and Cranford on October 5th. Both matches decidedly won by the Scotch Plains family 5-0. And whereas the team traveled to Chatham in the semifinal round and overcame tough group program by winning a 3-2, in which included a match to be completed the next day. On October 12th, the Raiders traveled to the perennial champion, Milburn, and earned a 3-2 victory and the first North 2 Group 3 sectional title since 1996. And whereas on October 14th, the Raiders traveled to Mercer County Park to face Maitland High School, the South Group 3 champion, and fought to a 3-2 victory. And after a few hours of rest, faced off with the North 1 Group 4 champion, Hennepin. And whereas the varsity girls tennis team defeated Hennepin by a score of 4-1, earning the first Group 3 title in the history of Scotch Plains family varsity girls tennis. And whereas the 2021 girls varsity tennis team was comprised of following athletes: Anna Suchka, grade 12. Samantha Edelman, grade 12. Elora Majumdar, grade 12. Nikita Sahasrabudi, grade 11. John Shin, grade 11. Didi Manuel, grade 10. Vita Manuel, grade 10. And whereas the girls' varsity tennis team exhibited outstanding talent, dedication, and teamwork throughout the season, it was led by head coach Luke Beatty and assistant coach Barbara Jordan. This team received well-deserved recognition from fellow students, staff, and the Scotch Plains communities for their outstanding efforts and accomplishments. Now therefore be resolved that the Scotch Plains Family Board of Education recognizes and congratulates the girls' varsity tennis team for their coach Luke Beatty and Barbara Joyner for their outstanding achievement and wishes them continued success in all future endeavors. Congratulations, everyone.
Breathe my mouth up a little bit. I will keep my nose covered. Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to be able to share available student achievement data from the 2020-2021 school year. As you may recall, this is typically the time of year that school districts report out on the results of state assessments and other so-called high-stake tests that our students take. But as you may also recall, due to the pandemic, the state has not, since the spring of 2019, administered the New Jersey Student Learning Assessment, typically taken by all students in grades 3 through 11. That said, our students in grades 4 through 12 did just complete a new battery of assessments known as the Start Strong assessments. These assessments are based on a subset of prioritized prior year academic standards. And once we receive our school and district reports, I'll be back to share these in a similar public forum. So, with thanks to members of our special education team, English as a second language department, and our high school administration, particularly Tim Donahue, who manages high school testing, and staff who endeavored in challenging circumstances to continue to engage students in related assessments, I'll provide an overview of the results of the dynamic learning maps, access for ELLs, ACTs, SATs, PSAT 11, and PSAT 10. And with gratitude to Lisa Howard, our district testing coordinator, and all those as gathered over there on that side of the room, had a hand in bringing the MAP assessment to our district in the midst of a pandemic. I will also provide a preview of MAP results. Finally, I do want to say thank you to the Board of Education Curriculum Committee, chaired by Stephanie Suriani, and served by Mrs. Nancy Bauer and Mrs. Amy Winkler, for helping to shape this presentation with great questions and suggestions along the way. And finally, before I turn to testing results, it's important to note that test scores can only give us an indication of how a certain group of students performed on a test given at a certain time. Test scores don't tell the whole story. They don't tell you about the richness of our curriculum and the richness of all the ways in which our students, through the rigorous efforts of our teachers and administrators, are led to learn, develop passions and interests, and grow and excel in ways that a test given on a certain day could never show. With that said, we'll begin with the dynamic learning maps, also known as the DLM. The DLM may be taken by students with the most significant cognitive disabilities for whom general state assessments are not appropriate, even with accommodations. DLM assessments offer these students a way to show what they know and can do in English language arts, mathematics, and science. DLM student score reports provide results related to a student's overall performance level for the subject. Student results are reported using 4 performance levels. Emerging, which means the student demonstrates a developing understanding of and ability to apply content knowledge and skills. Approaching, which means the student's understanding of and ability to apply targeted content knowledge and skills is nearing the target. And then, of course, target and advanced. Due to the small size of the population of students who take this assessment, known as the N size, we are only able to provide outcomes in the aggregate. Under the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, state reporting of disaggregated student data, such as student subgroups, may not be published if the results would yield personally identifiable information about an individual student. In New Jersey, the minimum N size is 10. So with such a small number of students in grades 3 through 8 and grade 11 taking the DLM, we're unable to provide grade-specific information. The DLM, though, does provide timely and meaningful information about student performance that allows teachers to target instruction to individual student needs, and administrators to more fully understand what students know and are able to do. And they also help to guide curriculum and professional development decisions. When used in combination with multiple measures of achievement, such as classroom observations and teacher-developed tests, the DLM assessment provides information about the progress of students as well as the effectiveness of educational programs. And you can see the results of this past spring's assessment up here. It's important to note, too, that this is not inclusive of all students who should have taken the DLM because you were required to be in school in person, and we had students who were remote throughout the school year last year. The Access for ELLs is taken annually by English language learners in kindergarten through grade 12. The assessment helps us to monitor students' progress in learning academic English, which is a type of English you need for reading and understanding study materials in a specific subject, such as well as writing about those subjects. The assessment is used to determine when a student has a level of proficiency in academic English that they may no longer require English as a second language services. It's important to note that the Access for ELLs was not administered in 2020, even though we were just about to start, as Ms. Howard reminded me. But we were unable to actually go through the process. And it's also equally important to note that not all students identified as limited English proficient are required, all of those students are required to take the assessment, even if they're not taking advantage of ESL services in the district. That said, of the 65 students who took the access in the spring of 2021, 12 of them, or 18.4%, scored above the cutoff required to exit our ESL program. The next most recent and pre-pandemic access yielded a 23% exit from the program. And it's worth noting that our enrollment in ESL has grown by 27% since then. It's also worth noting, as the committee asked the other night when I presented, that these students that exited the program had home languages, 9 different home languages. So 12 students, 9 different home languages. And the average time in the ESL program is 2 years. And they also range from the youngest being a second grader, I believe, who exited, to 12th graders exiting the program. The ACT is the first of several college readiness assessments that we will take a look at. Less popular than the SAT, as you can see here, participation in this assessment has dropped significantly over the past several years, and by 62% since 2017. We'll also see a drop-off in SAT participation for the class of 2021, but not to the same extent. ACT scores range from 9 to 36, and a mean of 24 to 26, as has been our history over the last 4 years, corresponds to an SAT score between 1180 and 1250. You will see these results mirrored in our class of 2021 SAT results in a later slide. Given that less than a third of the graduating class took part in ACT testing, it makes sense to take a deeper dive into the SATs and the participation and performance of our most recent graduates, the class of 2021. So here's a lot of data to look at on one slide. This shows the participation of the class of 2021 and their experience with the SAT. The first thing you'll notice here is the lower than expected number of test takers, just 274 of our 386 graduates. Like so much, the SAT was disrupted in the spring of 2020, which is when these students were juniors, and the time that most of them would have been taking the SAT. Furthermore, because of the pandemic, many colleges and universities suspended their use of the SAT as an application requirement, and some are continuing that practice this year. It may also be the case that the remaining students were those who took the ACTs, because if you add the two populations, you do get a figure that matches our graduating class. The percentage of test takers by gender was fairly even split, with just 6 more males taking the assessment than are females. And in terms of other demographics of the SPF test takers, the subgroups larger than the N of 10, as I mentioned earlier, included 64% who identified as white, 14% Hispanic or Latino, 8% Black or African American, 7% Asian, and 4% 2 or more races. The overall mean score for the class of 2021 was 1170, just 10 points below the corresponding ACT score, as I mentioned earlier. But again, we have to remember that the SAT is based on a much larger N size than the ACT scores. And here you can see the mean score for each racial and ethnic group. It is important to keep in mind the size of these groups and the limited information about other populations, such as the range of scores and the median, which can help us better interpret these outcomes. Another way to look at our students' results is to compare them with national outcomes, as you can see in these data points. The top table representing SPF outcomes by ranges, and the bottom table representing outcomes nationally. When you combine the top two ranges, meaning the 1400 to 1600 and the 1200 to 1390, you can see that 45% of our students scored above 1200, compared to just 28% nationally. The difference in outcomes at that level for our males and females is somewhat striking, with 15% favoring the males versus the females. Nationally, the difference is just 4%. This same juxtaposition of SPF and national results by race and ethnicity helps to answer the question about range of scores internally, but also shows that all groups, with the exception of Asian students, are achieving outcomes in the higher ranges than the same demographic across the nation. Returning to our overall results, the next several slides will show how SPF compares to state and national averages by overall mean and means in each section of the test. As you can see, SPF, the blue or far left bar in each set of bars, is above those in both the state in red and national scores in gold. Here you can see the percentage of scores in various ranges. You see us trailing the state in the over 1400, but outperforming the state in the 1200 to 1390 range. When you collapse the ranges to above 1200, between 1000 and 1190, and below 1000, you get a stronger sense of our students' overall performance. And you can see a similar trend in the evidence-based reading and writing scores, as well as in the mathematics scores. And again, these slides will be on our website if you want to refer back to them. As we know from the lower participation rate for the class of 2021 and the impact of the pandemic, we can see that although we have maintained our higher than state average performance, our lower participation has narrowed the gap between SPF and the state that we have enjoyed. This will be something that we will have to take a closer look at with our post-pandemic scores. As well as we'll be taking a closer look at the results of the PSAT taken by the members of the class of 2022 and 2023. So let's start with this year's senior class, the class of 2022. We can look at our own, as you can see here, our participation is closer to normal and resulted in a mean score of 1083. We will see when we look at the 10th grade results that this is likely not too dissimilar from the growth trajectory that yielded last year's SAT results. We can look at our own PSAT results by demographics as well. Here we see the difference between students who identify as female on the left and male on the right, in both overall mean as well as mean scores in each of the sections. Unlike the SAT results we just reviewed, here female students outperform their male peers with a stronger evidence-based reading and writing outcome. We can also look at the results by race and ethnicity. Again, the same lens of the size of each group and limited knowledge of other statistics. These are the overall mean scores. And these, although these are very small to look at right now, these are the mean scores in each of the sections. But we'll be taking a more expanded look at these in the next couple of slides. As we take a look at an additional metric that the PSAT provides, which is referred to as the benchmark score, which will be seen in red on the next two slides. Benchmarks are the scores that represent college readiness. In other words, if you score at or above the benchmark, you're on track to be ready for college when you graduate high school. If you score below the benchmark, you still have time to work on skills and can use the detailed feedback in the online score report to see which skills need the most improvement. These scores provide good information for counselors and the conversations they have with our students. So here's that same math chart with the addition of the benchmark score. As you can see here, with different levels by race and ethnicity, most of our groups are on track to be ready for college, with the exception of some of our students who identify as Black or African American. We know from an analysis of rosters of various models of instruction last year that a greater percentage of students of color remained remote throughout the year, and as a result, may need specific supports this year. We started to identify and put in place supports this past summer, and will continue to do so on the road forward. This is the ERW slide, the evidence-based reading and writing slide with the benchmark added. Here you can see that all of our racial and ethnic groups are on track to be ready for college. The PSAT 11, which is also known as the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, or the NMSQT, provides our teachers and curriculum leaders with data that can be used to target college readiness skills in their respective subject areas, while also providing counselors with opportunities to discuss college readiness with students who plan to pursue post-secondary education. So the PSAT, when given in 10th grade, gives similar data for us to take a look at. The class of 2023 took this assessment in last school year, yielding the participation and results found here. We see a similar pattern in the performance of various racial and ethnic groups. And applying the same benchmark as is applied to 11th graders, our now juniors are already on track to be ready for college as it relates to evidence-based reading and writing. While there is still room for growth, and there's still time for getting on track in mathematics. This slide, by comparing 10th and 11th grade results on the PSAT, simply points to expected growth in achievement as measured by these College Board assessments. A third column might have been added to show the 1170 average score of last year's 12th graders to further illustrate the expected growth over successive years of high school. Again, the PSAT provides useful student data to help students establish growth goals as together with our staff, they use detailed feedback from their online score reports to see which skills need the most improvement. The final high school assessment I'm going to talk about tonight is the AP, or Advanced Placement Exam. AP exams are standardized exams designed to measure how well a student has mastered the content and skills of a specific AP course. Many colleges and universities grant credit, advanced placement, or both for qualifying AP scores, typically a score of 3 or above. Students do not have to enroll in a course to sit for the exam, so some students who do take the AP exam in Scotch Plains Fernwood do so through self-study. And given what I mentioned earlier about the N size for reporting out many of these courses and exams, it's just not possible to report scores. So we're going to look at these scores more in the aggregate, like we looked at the scores earlier. SPF currently offers 21 different AP courses, including courses in English, the social sciences and history, the arts, mathematics, computer science, as well as world languages and cultures. The slide here presents a 3-year look at AP enrollment, the number of tests taken, and overall performance by considering the percentage of students scoring a 3 or above. As you can see, our overall enrollment in AP hovers around 1,000 students, with about 500 students taking 1 or more courses. This closely matches enrollment trends in similarly sized, high-performing high schools. The percentage of students enrolled in these courses taking the exam, which is optional and comes with a financial cost to the student, sits typically below 70%. The test in 2019-20 was an outlier and may have yielded results outside the norm, as in the spring of 2020, the College Board offered online, at-home AP exams that were open note and lasted only 45 minutes. Overall, the 3 years shown here, 2 of which were impacted by the pandemic, had unique tests and testing conditions that make comparisons among these very difficult to make. Still, what we do see here, if you look at the bottom two rows, is that in terms of percentages of students who take the test earning a 3 or above, SPFHS outperforms the national average. A significant point of pride here for us, though, is that unlike many schools, we have for many years provided access to these classes for all students, removing barriers like prerequisite courses or grades that can still keep students in some places from taking these courses. Many of these assessments discussed this evening yield recognition for our students, as you can see here. We again want to congratulate the class of 2021 for earning these and other accolades. I have described throughout this presentation different ways that we use the data included in it. What we learn from the data and what we do with it is critically important. Data does not always provide the answer, but data always leads to questions we need to answer. One of the first things to note is what we have done based upon the lack of state assessment data. Knowing that we would not have any NJSLA scores, this past year we looked to a new assessment system to help inform our practices and changes. Because it's going to be a while until the state assessment sets a new benchmark for looking longitudinally at student progress. So this spring we piloted the measures of academic progress, a growth assessment that we will continue to use in math in grades 1 through algebra 1, and we'll pilot in reading this year. Perhaps some parents out there received an email today with some score reports, yes? So, as I said, we'll be administering math 3 times a week to monitor student achievement and growth, individualize instruction, and set achievement and growth goals for students or groups of students in a class, in a school, or across the district. And as I said, the reading assessment will be piloted starting in the winter. In addition to a RIT score, which is an estimation of a student's instructional level and also helps us to measure student progress or growth in school, the assessment reports out results according to various instructional areas. While math is best used by teachers in their classrooms, it can over time inform other decisions we make as a district. With that said, I wanted to provide you with a quick and 30,000-foot view of our first 2 administrations of math. Here we see the spring results by grade level and mean RIT score as compared to math norms that are based on scores from 5,800 school districts that use math across the United States and as established in the spring of 2020, which was only months into the pandemic. SPF is the blue and the rest of the country is in the gray. You can see here that in each grade level, our students' spring 2021 mean RIT scores were above the math national norm. And we saw a similar outcome this fall, so this is our fall implementation, which just completed, and parents got these results today. You can see that as this fall, as compared to those same schools, we again performed above the national average. So, not to confuse you with the blue and the gray, but here's a blue and gray that is just us. So gray is the fall implementation and blue is the spring. So this slide shows, it sort of helps to illustrate how math is like a chart you might keep in your home, on which you mark a child's height at certain times, such as on a birthday. It shows the growth of students from spring to fall. And so what we're looking at here is the impact of what has become known as summer slide, which is also known as learning loss. As you can see, most grade levels held steady between the end of the year and the start of the school year, with the exception of grade levels in which we might traditionally see a dip, such as in grades 4 to 5, when they're transitioning from elementary to the middle school, as well in grades 5 to 6, which, as we know, grade 5 is a self-contained elementary-like experience, and grade 6 is departmentalized. So lastly, as I mentioned earlier, math gives an indication of performance in all of these instructional areas and draws our attention to areas that might be of concern, that we might need to shore up as well as areas of relative strength that we may be able to build upon. And the only area to bubble up from 2 administrations was in the spring administration in grade 8 in the area of geometry. And as most 8th graders are taking Algebra 1, this sort of makes sense in a way, but it's also really good information for our teachers of algebra and analytic geometry, which is a 9th grade class, to use in meeting the students' needs this year. So our next steps will be to analyze our Start Strong results, the assessment that the state used in lieu of last spring's advanced LA. We will use analysis of this, our map data, and other data and feedback from our teachers and administrators to develop further learning acceleration supports, such as after-school and summer activities, as we did this past summer with our Algebra 1 Pathways program. Again, there's a survey out there right now looking for some parent input on how we go about utilizing the funding that we're receiving related to the American Recovery Plan. So we're also planning to build our data analysis capacities at school, grade, classroom, and student levels. And that's part of the slow start of the map assessment, to give our teachers time with real data to take a look at that data and learn how they can use it. And we'll continue to provide social and emotional supports, such as with our upcoming pilot of the Second Step program. We can see that the supports we provided last year and our focus on SEL throughout the year helped us to maintain additional performance levels during a very challenging time. And we will continue to implement ELA and math initiatives and programs that are evidence-based, such as those you see here. And as I lifted from a previous state testing presentation, because I thought it was a great statement, we will continue to pursue the purpose articulated so well here. Our purpose is not to get scores up at the price of educating the love of learning out of our students. Our purpose is to provide a rigorous and engaging program of studies for all students. And all means all, as Dr. Ness has been saying to us recently. All students with robust educational, behavioral, and culturally inclusive supports. Finally, the challenges of the 2021 school year called on all of us, families, teachers, and staff, our administrators, and the Board of Education to rally support for providing the best education for our students. On behalf of our students, I want to thank you all for your support.
Dr. Moore. Anybody have any questions or comments? Mrs. Bauer?
I just wanted to thank the supervisors who are here, in addition to our Mr. Garrett and oh, very good. I wasn't sure we were on the road here. Because they really are the ones who take all these results, work with the teachers, and do such a fabulous job. And Mr. Garrett's leadership. So thank you very, very much. You don't have to.
Thank you, Mrs. Bauer. Any other comments or questions from you?
I'm so scared to go.
Mrs. Guaro?
I really appreciated the thoroughness of that. I think they also provided a lot of insight and encouragement. I think one of the most surprising things, I know we've talked about the growth of the ESL students, and that was an interesting number, 27% increase in 2 years. So I'm sure that plays into some of those, the process. But I appreciate the thoroughness and
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. Yes, it was quite a comprehensive report, Dr. McGarry. I appreciate all the details, and I'm glad it's going to be posted on the website for future use.
Okay,
Okay, then this will bring us to our public comment session. In accordance with the Scotch Plains Family Board of Education bylaws 0164, 0165. The meeting will be open for 15 minutes for public comments, maximum of 3 minutes per speaker. Speakers addressing the superintendent items, business functions, and other board business will be heard first. If time remains, speakers may address other matters. Speakers, when you come to the podium, please state your full name and the town in which you reside. Please note board members cannot respond regarding concerns with individual students or staff members. Such matters should be addressed with the superintendent's office. If there's anybody that would like to make a public comment, please come down to the podium, state your name and the town in which you reside.
Scotch Plains. It is critical that parents talk about racism with their kids. It is far too important to delegate it to the schools. Racism lives in the hearts of many individuals. And I want to be clear, it resides in the heart and not the skin or the religion. No group is inherently guilty and no one is immune. You cannot identify it through racial and religious profiling any more than you can fight drugs by pulling over black drivers or fight terrorism by pulling Muslims out of line in the airport. You cannot fight racism with racism. That is why I was appalled on June 7th to hear Dr. Mass quote Dr. Joshi's book and explain that a man's deplorable actions were an expression of his white privilege. She had never met this man, yet she assessed his action not as a product of his character, but on the basis of his race and religion. Why would she assess your children, whom she's never met as well, through the same racial and religious lens? Hatred exists everywhere. Even when everyone is the same race and religion, it just picks a different exterior trait such as wealth or family lineage. The solution must start and end with our shared humanity. Understand that our value and right to dignity and respect is inherent to our humanity. Dr. Joshi calls that comforting fluff. Now, I don't have a PhD, but I know I'm right when I say our humanity is everything, and that is what I teach my kids. In her book and in her tweets, when she calls the U.S. a white supremacist nation, I'm left deeply concerned how she divides people based on race and religion. As a Christian, whatever she describes is not my religion and certainly not my Jesus. And I will not adopt the weak and ineffectual faith that she demands to make Christians acceptable to her, and neither will my children. She assigns guilt and blame on the basis of skin color and religion, although who she condemns as white and Christian is very fluid depending on her needs. Finally, her book has been written many times before. It tells people they are not the great and prosperous people they could be. Then it pulls some events from history, out of context, blames them on some traits such as skin color and religion, adds an anecdote from the nation of 330 million people and says, see, it's all their fault. Now fall in line behind me. Does that sound familiar? The results in the past have been catastrophic, and we should learn from those mistakes and not repeat them. We can clearly see her transference of guilt and blame in her March 26th tweet declaring Georgia Republicans are not human beings over 1,000 words. I sent that to a friend of mine whose husband is a Georgia Republican. She assured me her husband is 100% human. This impacted real people. Well, real people to me, not real people to Dr. Joshi. What does she gain by stripping away humanity? What does she hope her followers will do? What have the results of this been in the past? Based on her approach, how could anyone make the cut as a human being? This is not what we want in our schools. Since February, the district has worked very hard to protect her from these questions. At the closed workshop, which was not the public open forum we were promised to address our concerns and questions, any question that did not affirm her position was systematically excluded. When asked, the moderator stated there are no more questions. That was not the case. I expect better from my districts. We must elect new and courageous voices to this board that will fight for our children regardless of race and religion, and will focus on our society's great equalizer, education. This is the Board of Education. That's what we need. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Denny. Is there anybody else who would like to make a public comment at this time? You have to speak a little closer to the mic.
Can you hear me now? Okay. My name is Heather, and I'm a family business.
Thank you.
to hear a board education candidate say during candidate's night that he doesn't support teaching diversity and inclusion to our students. Board of Education candidates, and perhaps some of my neighbors, may be surprised to hear that teaching diversity and inclusion to our students is already the law in New Jersey. In case anyone needs more details, Assembly Bill number 4454, enacted in 2020, requires New Jersey school districts to include instruction of diversity and inclusion as part of implementation of New Jersey student learning standards. Our district is not going above and beyond, bringing anti-bias training to teachers, students, and the community at large. They are actually just following the law. These actions are long overdue. If you're somehow still wondering why we need this training in discussion in Farmwood District, let me remind you that over the past 5 years, there have been a plethora of hateful, racist incidents in our schools. Elementary kids using the N-word to insult black classmates and chanting, "Build that wall," to Hispanic classmates. That particular incident prompted my 5 and 8-year-old at the time to ask if they were going to report for me because my first language is Spanish. So if we're going to talk about difficult conversations, think about that one. We have also seen swastikas and the N-word bracketed across our schools. Those acts are not the sign of an inclusive community or an inclusive student body. I have heard from students during the same Board of Education meeting, these ones, that the hate is not confined to racial or religious differences. The intolerance here extends to anyone perceived as different, be it because of sexual orientation, disability, or any other reason. If you haven't heard this until now, I'm sorry, where have you been? I applaud the district for bringing the anti-bias training to the school and the community, and for the strides that they have made increasing diversity and representation across various areas in school. But that should only be the beginning. Much needs to be done to ensure our schools are safe environments for all of our students, where differences are celebrated. The comments during the strategic planning meeting on September 28 and October 19 reflect the urgency of this work and the community expectations to see significant progress made in the upcoming years. The time is now, it's not in the future. Lastly, I want to urge the Board of Education to move with the times and ensure that these meetings are accessible to all. We need to incorporate video conferencing tools that are readily available and already easy to use. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Nolan.
Good evening. Oman, Washington, Scotch Plains, in the district.
Excuse me, I just didn't hear your name.
Mike Oman, Washington. I'd like to offer a suggestion and strongly also urge the Board of Education. The young lady just mentioned the Amistad law. I think that would be a great starting point in a sense, but even better. If ancient history, African history of humankind, started being taught at the very early levels and at the middle school level and at high school levels, I think it would open up some conversation that needs to be had in the district regarding diversity. I think it would open up conversations in a lot of different areas, including achievement. As Dr. McGarry pointed out in his presentation, you see consistently an issue when it comes to African American children, and that's something that we see nationwide. It can be effectively addressed. I I've had conversations previously with Superintendent, with Dr. Perry, most recently by email. I'm hoping that I can be instrumental in helping with some real strategic planning. I came to the last one at the high school. I wasn't very happy with some of the lack of receptiveness on the part of the presenter, because I heard the way she addressed some of the individuals that talked about diversity and separating it and having it isolated. I asked for, and I urged the board to establish some mechanism for accountability with regard to diversity and make sure that you have a point person in charge of lessons, developing these lessons. I have a good amount of experience with it because I've taught for years and years and years. Various cultures, various grade levels, or whatever. So I offer my assistance. I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, but in a sense, I consider myself kind of an expert because I've done it and I've done it from the heart. And that's another thing. When you train staff, you need to make sure you gauge where the level of commitment is with regard to things like this. If you want to stop the bickering, I think you need to start at ground level. Teach African history from the inception of humankind on Earth, and let the conversations develop. That way, children are going back also and teaching parents, and we don't have this vicious cycle of hatred going on and on and on, being so pervasive year after year after year. So I urge you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out and making comments, Mr. Ullman. Go ahead, Dr. Mack.
So thank you to everyone who came to the mic this evening. Your feedback and your participation is always heard and appreciated. If I could just make a comment to the first speaker, Mr. Denning, certainly I agree with you that a key piece of all of our work, first as humans, as parents, as educators, is to embrace our shared humanity and do that by understanding each other. I'm thinking that the reference that I made in the Dr. Joshi text was regarding an example of white privilege, where a coach was having the whole team pray the Lord's Prayer, and it wasn't the prayer of all of the students. So it was just an example of how diversity training is needed, because that coach might not have been meaning to offend, but the student who said I'm uncomfortable saying a prayer that is one that I'm not familiar with or in my religion, that student was punished. So it was just an example that spoke to me as a need to provide training. The board did make a position on Dr. Joshi's tweet. Any type of politics is not what we're about, and we do not agree with the tweet, and we had addressed that. The evening with Dr. Joshi had a Q&A. Our facilitators did group those questions by theme, and I do recognize that all of the questions were not stated as they were asked, but as promised, I am publishing a Q&A of all of those questions. And that document will be finished very soon. In addition to the publication of that document, we will be including next steps of work that the district is interested in doing with parent input around diversity and equity, but also other initiatives that will take place in the district.
Dr. Miss, if I could just add to your calling up the questions. Questions were not answered if there was no name attached to them as well. So if it was just a question without someone stepping up and saying, you asked the question, those were not used.
That's correct. But we did include some of those in the Q&A if people forgot to include them. With respect to the strategic planning process, we're very pleased with how many people are participating. And again, I agree that a big outcome of the strategic planning is measurable outcomes. And that does take place, though we might not be seeing it now. So that accountability is something that will be published to the community, and then the accountability will be reported out at board meetings. So we can all together see the progress that we are making. And though the diversity and inclusion work is something that I appreciate that it's recognized that the district is taking it seriously, and we're leaning into that work. We have a long way to go. And it is something that we see as an emerging #1 goal of the strategic plan.
Thank you, Dr. Mask. Mr. Sylvester, do you have time for any more public comment? Is there anybody else that would like to make public comment?
John Denning, Scotch Plains. My name was on my question. June 17th, me and another woman who spoke were told there would be an open public forum to address our concerns, that you were worried about our concerns that we had expressed that night. Both of our questions were eliminated from the question set. The two people whose question brought about that event were eliminated. It was not the public forum that we were promised. This board needs to keep its promises. You sent a letter that said critical race theory is not taught in the district. You go to the workshop with Dr. Joshi. Somebody asked her to define critical race theory. She brings out 2 points. What were those 2 points? Exactly the same thing she had stated as fact during the workshop. Our tax dollars were used to teach critical race theory at that workshop. She has said she incorporates it into all her classes. If she is honest, that means that she incorporated it into the teaching of the administration and of the teachers. You can't say these things if you don't plan on delivering them. Thank you.
Thank you for your additional comments, Mr. Bennett.
Can I just ask, it's very hard to hear. If everyone, when you're speaking, both anyone, just speak slowly, so it can be a little bit and closer so we can hear better.
Thank you, Mrs. Thorne.
Good evening, my name is Nita Evans, I'm in Scotch Plains. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Rivera for that detailed report. I have not seen a report at that level from a board meeting here, so thank you. I still have some questions about it, and I'll reach out to you. I do want to make a comment that the work that Dr. Joshi is going to be doing in the district is very, very important, because though we have some wonderful teachers in the district, being comfortable talking about race, talking about equality is not in everyone's wheelhouse, and mistakes have been made by well-meaning people. They've been made in the classroom, and it's a bumpy road, I understand that, but the work has to be done, and the fact that Dr. Joshi is here is greatly appreciated and greatly welcomed. We have to understand everyone's perspective in this district, and although the perspectives of people of color are not percentage-wise greater than other people's perspectives, their perspectives need to be heard and understood. And yes, we have great families in this community, but families have different perspectives at home. And that is reflected in the classroom by the comments that the students make. And so the teachers need to be prepared to respond to those comments. And that's why the work of Dr. Joshi, I feel, is so, so important. And also one more thing, the Wellness Committee, I just wondered when that was going to be starting up again.
So the Wellness and Equity Committee will continue. at this point, we were using the strategic plan as the voice of the community. And after our third meeting with the strategic planning, we will be scheduling those dates again for that task force.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Evans. Any other public comments at this time? There will be another opportunity near the end of the meeting. Seeing none, we'll close this portion of the meeting and move on to the committee reports. Are there any committee reports this evening? Mrs. Soriano?
I don't have a report, but I just wanted to let everyone know that the curriculum committee did meet this past Monday, but it was to preview and discuss and ask any questions of the testing report that Dr. McGarry presented tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Soriano. Are there any other comments or reports? Thank you, Tanya, please.
Thank you, Dr. asking. The Wellness and Equity Committee meeting met last October 21st, and Dr. McGarry gave us a few updates on professional development that was on October 11th. There are 32 different workshops focusing on reading in elementary schools for the teachers, reading and writing workshops in the high school, professional development on November 2nd. It's also focusing on diversity and inclusion, and just giving highlights. We talked about coming on November 11th for park naming. There'll be lessons on the Tuskegee Airmen, how we can use their past efforts to enhance our future. There will be a writing workshop for the middle school. There will be a renaming ceremony. There will also be an essay on why I'm proud to be a Hennepin student. We plan on having a community event, the student council, the president and vice president will be there, both mayors as well. We also talked about the real parents, our partnership with them, essay contest, winner's logo and mascot. Sorry. We also will be doing ribbon cutting. We also talked about a focus on special education, and that concludes the highlights of my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Any other reports? Ms. Bowden? Yes, Ms. Bowden.
The Community Relations Committee met on October 13th. We were joined us with the communication consultants from George Bishop Communications. They are looking for good news to put in a press release, and they want to focus on our achievements, which we do have a lot of. And once the press release is written, they will distribute to local media, social media, posts, Twitter, and website. We discussed putting snippets of student performances and instructional updates on their website for easy access. We also discussed the format of the newsletter, and we'll have a couple of standing sections including district finances and instructional updates, and distribution of the newsletter was discussed at length. We would mail, email, put on our website, social media, print, and we've also discussed doing print copy at local businesses, etc. Because our goal is to communicate with a consistent message using multiple media to be able to reach all our community members, because not everyone accesses information like that. And we are looking forward to the feedback from the strategic plan for areas that we need to focus on, combine that with the draft communication action plan that we had received, and then we'll complete a good piece of action plan that we will finalize. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Berman. Any other reports? Seeing none. Just as I mentioned, for strategic planning, we have had meetings 1 and 2, and our third upcoming and final meeting will be November 16th. Letters to the board. We received 2 emails from the public and the appropriate administrator responded. Moving on to board motions, curriculum report, Dr. Mast.
So starting with 3C, I move that the Board of Education approves the revised student calendar where Election Day, November 2nd, is closed for students and is a professional development day for teachers, and November 8th is a single session day for elementary schools. I will group these. Also, I move that the Board of Education acknowledge the receipt of the report presented by the superintendent on October 15, 2021 for enrollment numbers. We currently have 5,643 students enrolled in our schools. 5C, I move that the Board of Education approve the listed field trips. And 6C, move that the Board of Education approves the NJDOE LEA agency guidance for Chapter 27 Emergency Virtual Instruction Program for 21-22 school year. What's significant about that is schools can only move to go virtual if they are closed for 3 days and it will be under the conditions of some type of weather crisis or health crisis. In state of emergency.
Can I have a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Winkler. Is there a second?
Second, Laura.
Thank you, Mrs. Bork. Is there any comment or question? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Personnel report, Dr. Mast?
Yes, I move that the Board of Education approves the superintendent's recommendations for personnel as discussed this evening in exec.
So, Mr. Jones? Thank you, Mrs. Winkler. The second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brody. Any question or discussion? Thank you. Mr. Jones, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bauer?
Yes.
Mrs. Burrell?
Yes.
Ms. Brody?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Ms. Sirianni?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Winkler?
Yes.
Mr. Murray? Yes. Dr. Colosimo?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Mast. And that brings us right back to Mr. Jones with business report.
Number 1, staff training. Number 2 is special legal services at Hennepin. Number 3 is transportation. Related to special education. Number 4 was additional. Number 4 is security that we use for backup in case we need police coverage. Number 5 is if somebody can approve purchase orders when I'm out of the office. Number 6 is our budget calendar. Number 7 is planning for the plays. Number 8 is so we can do athletic transportation bids. Number 9 is so we can pay bills that are due in between board meetings, critical items such as health insurance. Number 10 is the sidebar agreement where we are paying $4,000 stipend for nurses paid through federal funding. Number 11 is security drills that we have to put on. Number 12 is our standard monthly financial report. Number 13 is the account reconciliations that go along with that. Number 14 is our bills list. Number 16 is a temporary employee for maternity leave. Number 17 is disposal of Chromebooks to public to sell them publicly. Number 18 is a security upgrade in our central office, paid for by maintenance reserve. Number 19 is air filters and paid for by maintenance reserve. Number 20 is contract for our substitutes. Number 21 is a legal case for special education settlement. Number 22 is a standard report that we have to send to the county on our maintenance.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Can I have a motion? So moved. Thank you, Mrs. Burby. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Is there any question or discussion on any of these items? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Board policies. Mrs. Walker?
The Board Policy Committee met on October 27th. We discussed several policies, and they are on the agenda this evening. The ones that pertain to COVID, we are hoping to approve tonight. And then the other one that we discussed would be just approved for first reading this time. So policies are policy 1648.13, school employee vaccination requirements. Governor Murphy's Executive Order 253 requires all school employees to be fully vaccinated or be tested for COVID a minimum of 1 to 2 times each week, effective October 18th. This is a completely new policy that addresses these vaccination and testing requirements, and this policy is mandated. Policy 1648.14, safety plan for healthcare settings in school buildings related to COVID. Due to updated OSHA requirements for healthcare settings, this policy is required specifically for the nurses' offices and other healthcare spaces in our schools. This is a completely new policy and is also mandated. Policy 2425, emergency virtual or remote instruction program. NJSA 18A 7F-9, Public Law 2020 C57, permits school districts to implement virtual or remote instruction in the event the district is required to close one or more schools for more than 3 consecutive school days due to a declared state of emergency, declared public health emergency, or directed by the appropriate health agency or officer to institute public health-related closure. These days of virtual or remote instruction will count toward the 180-day requirement. This is a completely new policy and is mandated. Policy 1648.11, the road forward, COVID health and safety. The Department of Education released the road forward health and safety guidance for the 21-22 school year. This guidance replaces the road back guidance from June 2020. This policy addresses the requirements of the road forward. Previously, we approved Appendix C, mask wearing protocol, and Appendix G, transportation protocols. At this time, as required for the 3 policies above, we are adding Appendix A, vaccination, Appendix B, communication with local health department, and Appendix K, testing. So at this time, I move that the board adopts these policies as final reading.
Mrs. Woodward made the motion. Do we have a second? So moved. Ms. Burby. Thank you, Ms. Burby. Any question or discussion about those policies? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Woodward.
And then I also move that we approve first reading of policy 5751, sexual harassment of students. The policy and the regulation, actually. And the U.S. Department of Education recently published a final rule amending the federal Title IX regulations regarding sexual harassment of students by school employees, other students, or third parties. The new regulations include a detailed procedure on how public school districts must respond to allegations of sexual harassment. These new federal regulations do not align with the provisions of the New Jersey Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act, but also do not replace it. The U.S. Department of Education Office of
Civil Rights released a Q&A document on the Title IX requirements defining school districts' responsibilities related to sexual harassment of students. Among the requirements are designating a Title IX coordinator, an investigator, a decision maker, and an appeal officer, as well as establishing specific reporting, investigation, hearing, and appeal processes. These are changes to existing policy and regulation. Basically, it's completely rewritten and mandated. So at this time, I move that we approve first reading of policy 5751.
Mrs. Wade has a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Soriano. Any question or discussion? Okay, so all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Wade. Thank you. Any new board business? Seeing none. Other board business, any liaison reports? Seeing none. Two OBB requests to attend workshop and workshop reports. We will all involved one way or another, Tuesday, Wednesday, or today, with the New Jersey School Board's workshop. I have not written any report on yet, because I just attended where people coming here, so we'll take care of that at our next meeting. 3 OBB, the principal's resolution. Read that. You know, this is principal's one. Whereas the Scotts Plains Family Board of Education has declared the month of October 2021 National Principals Month, in coordination with the efforts of the National Association of Elementary School Principals, the American Federation of School Administrators, and the National Association of Secondary School Principals, working with the U.S. Congress to designate National Principals Month and resolutions thereof. Whereas the vision, dedication, and determination of a principal provides a leading force behind any school reform effort, especially now during a global pandemic. And whereas the principals are expected to be educational visionaries, instructional leaders, assessment experts, disciplinarians, community builders, public relations experts, budget analysis, facility managers, special program administrators, and guardians of various legal, contractual, and policy mandates and initiatives, as well as committed to the education and development of young people, the most valuable resource. And whereas principals will play a vital role in the successful implementation of every Student Succeeds Act, the ESSA. And whereas the principals set the academic tone for their schools and work collaboratively with teachers and develop and maintain high curriculum standards and develop mission statements and set performance goals and objectives for schools to achieve educational excellence. And whereas the Scotts Plains Family Board of Education honors such exemplary elementary, public, private, and independent school leaders committed to serving students from pre-kindergarten to grade 8 in their profession. And whereas the Scotts Plains Family Board of Education recognizes outstanding middle level and high school principals who have succeeded in providing high-quality learning opportunities for students, as well as their commendable contributions to their profession. And whereas to honor and recognize the contribution of all principals and assistant principals at all grade levels to the success of students in New Jersey elementary and secondary schools, and to encourage residents of New Jersey to observe National Principals Month with appropriate ceremonies and activities that promote awareness of the school's leadership role in ensuring that every child has access to high-quality education. Now therefore be it resolved, in honor of the service of all elementary, middle level, and high school principals, and to recognize the importance of their leadership so that every child has access to high-quality education, the month of October 2021 is hereby designated in the state of New Jersey to be National Principals Month. And the Scotts Plains Family Board of Education is especially proud to celebrate with our school principals, Dr. David Heisey, Dr. Jocelyn Dumas, Dr. Kevin Holloway, Mr. Scott Whitman, Dr. Karen Woodwell, Mrs. Conley Warburg, and Dr. Sasha Slocum, and Mr. Justin Fiore, and commend their continued school leadership. Thank you for your service. We have approved the resolution after the last meeting. I just wanted to read this.
I would just like to add one thing, Dr. Polakowski. Today we delivered the resolution to all of the principals, along with a very festive Life is Good mug with some type of motivational and message along with gratitude. And the mugs were filled with kisses for encouragement and love for the hard work that our principals are always doing, but particularly in this time.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Mass. So shout out to all principals. Okay, and then the approval of the minutes. Everyone make a motion to approve the minutes from September 29th, regular board meeting and its executive session. Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Brody. Any questions, comments? All those in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? One abstention. Mrs. Warren. Motion passes. Okay, and then this brings us to our second and final public comment portion. In accordance with the Scotch Plains Valley Public School Bylaw 01640165, the meeting will be open for 15 minutes for public comments, maximum 3 minutes per speaker. Speakers addressing superintendent items, business functions, and other board business will be heard first. If time remains, speakers may address other matters. Speakers, please come to the podium, state your full name and the town in which you reside. And please note, board members cannot respond regarding concerns of individual students or staff members. Such matters should be addressed with the superintendent's office. So if you'd like to make a public comment, please come to the podium at this time.
Good evening, my name is Lauren Long, I reside in Scotch Plains. So the first thing I want to talk about is regard to the food that's served to our children. One, we appreciate it because I believe hot lunch is coming back, and that will help a lot of parents in the district. But I'm not quite sure when the contract is up, but when it is there opportunity for the district to look at local small business and caterers within our district to help provide healthier and more tasty options to the children while being commercial at whatever spending that we are? I'm sure that the community would be invested to giving back to our students in a commercial way and helping us have better options. The next thing I wanted to say is that I appreciate the district's continued commitment to diversity and inclusion because we all know the importance of it. While we also are believers that education is part at home, we would be amiss not to recognize the important role that our educators play in impacting our future generations. If education at home was really truly the only path to self-education of our children, we would not be in the predicament that we are at this time. We continue to appreciate the role that the district and the administrators and the teachers play in teaching our children true history and letting them understand while we are different, we are the same, and to be advocates for each other in this world. I'm excited to continue the path that started out last year with the district's more assertive role in diversity and inclusion, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Steve.
I'll simply say that more hot lunch options are coming. They're currently in place at the high school, and next we're moving forward to middle school. What's the date, Mrs. Cleary? November 8th.
I told you that because my daughter is speaking with bated breath. My name is Joan Peters, and I am a resident of Clark, but I have 2 grandchildren in the school system in the district, and I would like to congratulate all of you on the work that you're doing. It was quite an impressive report at the beginning of the session, and I thank you, Dr. Mary, and everybody here that has made this possible, all the teachers, etc. And I also want to say thank you for pushing the diversity and inclusion, because it is so important in this country and in this set of towns that we continue this work. It is horrifying to me that we are as split as we are in this country, and I would like to not see it in Scotch Plains and Fenwick, and I hope that we all can get along, as somebody more famously said right before he was beaten. But I just wanted to say, especially about Dr. Joshi, having had personal experience with her as in an instructive situation and in a public situation, I could not recommend somebody more for her expertise. And to cherry pick whatever you want to out of her book, which I did not think was the topic of the training that you were giving, is not fair. So that's what I want to say. Thank you all for everything you do. And,
Well, thanks for coming out and making comments, even though you don't reside in the town and you stick it up for your grandchildren. That's very important. Is there anybody else that would like to make a public comment? Seeing no one, I'm going to close this portion of the meeting and move on to remarks for the good of the order. Anybody have any remarks for the good of the order? No one has any remarks? Mr. Murray?
I think sports, we have to congratulate the girls in the championship. I know the boys played really hot fun in the sport. So I don't know if we were lost. I'm hearing some of the floor earlier in the sessions that we had wrong. The girls play Saturday night, I believe, in the park, and then Friday night, I'm also going to do the football game, Woodbridge, where a seeded football team did their second loss of the season, and they're going tomorrow for hopefully another victory. Congratulations to the sports teams for continuing to do well. I would like to say that Friday nights, under lights, playing football has really brought the community out. I mean, when you look at the top stands, the groups that are out there, the student body that's there supporting their teams, and the coaches can't hear themselves yell, the players don't feel because how loud the fans are. To me, that's what brings the community together, and to me, that's what makes it fun. And I really just feel the energy within the community just through those events alone. Other organizations are benefiting from it as well, whether it's soccer across the community, and others. So I know we got to use the plan last year, so I think it's been a great thing to add to our plan.
I agree, Mr. Murray. I was at that game as well. It was very exciting and very proud, yes.
So last Saturday, I went to Old Bridge High School, and I was rooting on the Scotch Plains Family High School band. They came in third in that competition, and there were a lot of Raider parents cheering them on. Their performance I did see at the Friday Night Lights football game, and then I saw them in line with all of the other bands performing, and their hard work really showed in that competition. And today, I, by luck, stumbled into a grade 5, 6 Halloween party after school behind Park. I think it's called the 5th grade, 6th grade social, and there were hundreds of kids dancing and just joyful and just very much ready for Halloween. So watch out, everyone. There is a lot of energy.
Thank you, Dr. Mass. Our next Board of Education meeting will be Thursday, November 11th, an open agenda meeting, 7:30 exec, 8 o'clock public portion, and then Thursday, November 18th, regular public meeting, 7:30 for executive session, and 8 o'clock for the public portion. If there's no more remarks for the good of the order, I'd like to entertain a motion for adjournment. Thank you, Mr. Murray.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Winkler. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Good night, everybody.